The internet didn't just pause. It froze mid-scroll. Because the moment that phrase hit social media, cold, sharp, and dangerously personal, everything changed. She's on meds. No warning. No context. No confirmed documents. Just a statement allegedly tied to Vincent Herbert that detonated across timelines and instantly dragged Tamar Braxton into one of the most uncomfortable, boundary-crossing controversies of her life. This wasn't relationship drama. This wasn't messy gossip. This felt like something deeper, something invasive. Because the moment the word medical entered the conversation, fans stopped arguing and started asking how far is too far. Within minutes, screenshots began circulating. Alleged messages, cryptic posts, anonymous accounts claiming there was a report being discussed behind closed doors. No proof. No verified documents. But the implication alone was enough to send shockwaves through the internet. Because if even a fraction of this was true, then a line had just been crossed that most people don't come back from. And it didn't stop there. Insiders began whispering that this wasn't a random outburst. That the timing was deliberate. Calculated. That something had happened behind the scenes, something explosive enough to trigger a response this personal. Then came the second wave. Clips of Tamar's past emotional moments resurfaced. Interviews. Reality TV breakdowns. Moments where she was vulnerable, expressive, unfiltered. And suddenly, those same moments were being reinterpreted through a lens no one had agreed to. Fans weren't just watching anymore. They were questioning everything. Was this truth? Was this manipulation? Or was this the most dangerous kind of narrative, one built on implication instead of evidence? Meanwhile, Tamar said nothing. No immediate response. No denial. No explanation. Just silence. And that silence, it didn't calm the situation. It made it louder. Because in the absence of answers, the internet creates its own. And now, the biggest question burning through every comment section, every blog, every viral clip is this. Why would someone expose something that personal? Unless they knew exactly what it would do. The fallout didn't wait. It exploded instantly, spreading across every corner of the internet like a wildfire no one could contain. Within hours of the phrase being linked to Vincent Herbert, timelines were flooded with speculation, outrage, and one deeply unsettling question. Did something private just get turned into public ammunition? Because the moment Tamar Braxton's name became attached to alleged medical conversations, the tone shifted from gossip to something far more serious. Fans weren't laughing. They weren't even debating yet. They were stunned. And then came the screenshots. Anonymous accounts began posting what they claimed were fragments of private conversations, blurred images, partial text threads, and heavily cropped messages that hinted at discussions about Tamar's emotional state. None of it confirmed. None of it verified. But the language was enough to ignite chaos. One alleged message read, "She's not stable right now." Another claimed, "You don't know what she's been taking." No names. No timestamps. No proof. But the internet doesn't pause for verification. It runs with momentum. And suddenly, those phrases were everywhere. Twitter threads began dissecting Tamar's past behavior. TikTok creators started stitching together old clips from Braxton family values, analyzing her tone, her reactions, even her facial expressions. Moments that once felt human, raw, emotional, relatable, were now being reframed as something else entirely. And that shift, that's what made this situation feel different. Because this wasn't just about what was said. It was about how quickly people began reinterpreting her entire history through a narrative that had no confirmed foundation. Meanwhile, insiders started talking. Quietly at first. Then louder. One entertainment blogger claimed the alleged comments didn't come out of nowhere. According to that source, tensions between Tamar and her ex-husband had reportedly been building again behind the scenes, long after their public separation. Old disagreements. Unresolved emotions. And what the source described as a disagreement that escalated beyond what either side expected. No one could confirm what that disagreement was about. But the timing of everything felt too sharp to be coincidence. And then came the first major twist. A well-known gossip account posted something that sent shockwaves through the fanbase. There's audio. Audio. Not messages. Not rumors. An alleged recording. According to the post, the clip supposedly captured a heated exchange where one voice, believed by some to be Vincent Herbert, made a reference to Tamar's condition in a way that felt less like concern and more like confrontation. The account didn't release the audio. They didn't provide proof. But they claimed multiple people had heard it. And just like that, the situation escalated again. Because if a recording exists, then this wasn't just careless wording. It was a moment. A real, emotional, possibly explosive moment that someone might have captured. And if that moment ever becomes public, everything could change overnight. Meanwhile, Tamar Braxton remained silent. No live videos. No interviews. No immediate clapback. Just quiet. But this wasn't the kind of silence that fades into the background. This was the kind of silence that amplifies everything around it. Fans began reading into every move. Every post. Every absence. Was she preparing to respond? Was she choosing not to engage? Or was something happening behind the scenes that the public didn't yet understand? Then came another layer of chaos. A resurfaced interview clip began trending, one where Tamar spoke openly about emotional struggles, healing, and the importance of taking care of herself. At the time, the clip had been praised. Now, it was being weaponized. Comment sections filled with speculation. People began connecting dots that may not have been connected at all. And once again, the narrative started writing itself. But not everyone was comfortable with what they were seeing. Mental health advocates and public figures began stepping in, calling out the direction the conversation had taken. They pointed out something critical. Even if someone is receiving treatment, taking medication, or navigating personal challenges, that is not scandal. That is care. That is responsibility. And more importantly, it is private. Those voices slowed some of the chaos. But not all of it. Because the internet had already locked onto the story. And once a narrative like this starts moving, it doesn't stop easily. Meanwhile, new rumors continued surfacing. One insider claimed there had been a recent confrontation between Tamar and Vincent that had grown unexpectedly intense. Another suggested that people close to both sides were scrambling to contain the situation before it escalated further. None of those claims were confirmed. But they added fuel to an already volatile fire. And then, just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more explosive, a second alleged leak surfaced. This time, it wasn't text. It wasn't audio. It was a single sentence posted by an anonymous account that immediately went viral. She knows what he has. What does that mean? No one knew. But the implication was enough to send fans into a frenzy. Because now the story wasn't just about what had been said. It was about what might be coming next. And the possibility that there were details, real or rumored, that hadn't even reached the public yet. At this point, the situation had transformed completely. What began as a single phrase had become a full-scale online storm involving alleged leaks, resurfaced footage, insider whispers, and a growing sense that something bigger was unfolding behind the scenes. But through all of it, one thing remained unchanged. Tamar hadn't spoken. And that silence, it was building pressure. Because if she decides to respond, if she chooses to address everything head-on, the narrative could flip instantly. And if that rumored audio ever leaks in full, the internet won't just react. It will explode all over again. The second wave didn't arrive quietly. It crashed in like a tidal wave, carrying something far more dangerous than rumors, interpretation. Because by now, the internet wasn't asking if something had happened. It was asking what it meant. And that shift changed everything. Within 24 hours of the alleged audio rumors spreading, a longer version of the supposed recording began circulating in private gossip circles, just fragments, just seconds at a time, but enough to keep the tension boiling. No official release. No verified source. But people claimed they heard it. And what they described only made things worse. According to multiple bloggers, the clip allegedly captured a heated exchange where one voice, believed by some to be Vincent Herbert, didn't just mention Tamar's condition. He allegedly weaponized it. One anonymous source claimed the voice said something along the lines of, "That's why nobody takes you seriously." If true, that line didn't just cross a boundary. It obliterated it. Because now the story wasn't just about privacy. It was about credibility. About someone allegedly using deeply personal information to undermine another person's voice. And the internet reacted instantly. Twitter exploded into chaos. Hashtags began trending. Fans weren't just debating anymore, they were furious. Supporters of Tamar Braxton flooded timelines with clips of her speaking about strength, survival, and healing, reframing the entire narrative as an example of resilience being twisted into weakness. Meanwhile, critics took a different angle. Some argued that emotional public figures often face scrutiny, and that past openness about personal struggles could lead to conversations others might not fully control. That argument didn't calm the storm. It made it worse. Because it opened a dangerous question. When someone shares part of their story, does that give others permission to tell the rest? The answer, for many watching, was a loud and immediate no. But the chaos didn't stop there. Because as the audio rumors intensified, something else surfaced, something that shifted the focus yet again. A set of alleged text messages began circulating, supposedly exchanged between Tamar and someone close to her after the initial comments went viral. One message read, "I'm not explaining my healing to people who want to break me." Another said, "They only bring it up when they want control." No confirmation. No proof. But the tone felt real enough to hit a nerve. Because it aligned with what many fans already believed. That this wasn't just about exposure. It was about power. And then came the confrontation rumor. According to a well-known entertainment podcast host, Tamar and Vincent may have had a recent face-to-face encounter that escalated quickly, an argument that insiders described as emotionally intense and unresolved. The details were vague. But the host claimed the exchange included raised voices, accusations, and what they described as a moment where everything that had been building finally came out. And if that's true, then the alleged audio might not be the beginning of this story. It might be the aftermath. Meanwhile, the ripple effects were spreading beyond the immediate situation. Celebrities began weighing in. Not directly naming Tamar. Not directly referencing Vincent. But speaking about the broader issue. One singer posted, "Stop using people's healing against them." Another wrote, "Medication is not a scandal. It's survival." Those posts were shared thousands of times within hours. Because they weren't just about one person. They were about a pattern people recognized instantly. And that pattern, it hit hard. Because for years, audiences have watched public figures, especially women, have their emotions dissected, labeled, and sometimes dismissed. And now, it felt like the same cycle was playing out again. But this time, it felt more personal, more invasive, more deliberate. Meanwhile, something else started happening. Fans began turning their attention to Vincent Herbert. Old interviews resurfaced. Past controversies were revisited. Moments where he spoke about relationships, control, and personal dynamics were suddenly being re-examined through a new lens. And just like that, the narrative began shifting again. Because now, people weren't just questioning Tamar's story. They were questioning his. Why now? Why say something like that at this moment? Was it frustration? Was it retaliation? Or was it something more calculated? No one had answers. But everyone had opinions. And those opinions were spreading fast. Then came the most unsettling development yet. A media insider posted a cryptic message that sent shockwaves through the entire situation. There's more that hasn't come out. More? That single word was enough to reignite everything. Because if there are details, real or rumored, that haven't surfaced yet, then what the public has seen so far might only be a fraction of the full story. And that possibility, it changed the tone instantly. Because now the conversation wasn't just about what had already happened. It was about what might be coming next. Meanwhile, through all of this, Tamar Braxton remained silent. No direct response. No public statement addressing the rumors, the alleged audio, or the swirling speculation. And that silence, it was no longer just noticeable. It was powerful. Because the longer she didn't speak, the more the anticipation built. Fans began waiting. Watching. Refreshing timelines. Because everyone knew the same thing. If Tamar decides to respond, if she chooses to tell her side of the story, it won't just add to the conversation. It will redefine it. And if that rumored full audio ever leaks, the story that's already shaking the internet could turn into something even bigger. Something no one involved will be able to control. The third wave didn't explode. It settled in, and that made it even more dangerous. Because by now, the internet wasn't reacting anymore. It was deciding. Not based on proof. Not based on confirmed facts. But based on repetition, interpretation, and a narrative that had taken on a life of its own. At this point, the phrase that started everything had already embedded itself into public perception. She's on meds. It didn't matter that no verified medical report had ever surfaced. It didn't matter that no official documentation had been released. The implication alone had done what implications do best, it had reshaped the conversation. Now, every past moment involving Tamar Braxton was being viewed through a new lens. Old interviews. Reality TV clips from Braxton family values. Emotional scenes that once made fans empathize were now being dissected like evidence in a case no one had agreed to prosecute. That's when the tone shifted again. From curiosity to judgment. And that shift is where things became irreversible. Because once a narrative hardens, it doesn't need proof anymore. It just needs people willing to believe it. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, insiders began painting a very different picture. According to one source close to the situation, the entire controversy had less to do with any actual medical report, and more to do with a breakdown in communication that spiraled out of control. The source claimed tensions between Vincent Herbert and Tamar had been quietly escalating for weeks, possibly even months. Unresolved issues. Old emotional wounds. And what the insider described as a disagreement that hit a breaking point neither of them expected. If that's true, then the alleged comments weren't part of a calculated plan. They were part of an emotional moment that went too far. But here's the problem. The internet doesn't measure intent. It measures impact. And the impact was massive. Meanwhile, something subtle but powerful started happening. Fans began pushing back. Not against Tamar, but against the narrative itself. Threads appeared questioning the ethics of discussing anyone's health, confirmed or not. Creators began reminding audiences that taking care of yourself is not a scandal. That medication, therapy, and healing are not weaknesses. They are survival tools. Those voices didn't erase the damage, but they slowed the momentum. They created friction in a conversation that had been moving too fast. And then came the moment that shifted everything again. Late one night, Tamar finally posted. No long explanation. No direct confrontation. Just a short, carefully worded message that immediately went viral. I will never let anyone tell my story for me. That was it. No names. No details. But the meaning. Crystal clear. Within minutes, the post had thousands of comments. Fans flooded her replies with support. Celebrities reshared it. And suddenly, the narrative began to tilt. Because for the first time since the controversy started, Tamar had spoken, not to explain, not to defend, but to reclaim control. And that changed the energy instantly. Because now, the story wasn't just about what had been said. It was about who had the right to say it. Meanwhile, Vincent Herbert remained quiet. No clarification. No apology. No attempt to directly address the storm that had formed around his alleged comments. That silence created a new kind of tension. Because now, people weren't just questioning Tamar's narrative. They were questioning his lack of response. Why not correct the record? Why not deny the rumors? Why not shut down the speculation if it wasn't true? Those questions began circulating just as fast as the original story. And with each unanswered question, the spotlight shifted further. Because silence, in this phase, didn't feel neutral. It felt strategic. Meanwhile, the rumored full audio recording still hadn't surfaced. No verified leak. No confirmed source. Just whispers that it existed, and that if it ever came out, it would change everything. But as days passed, something unexpected happened. The story began to lose its sharp edges. Not because people forgot, but because they started to see it differently. What once looked like explosive exposure now felt like something else entirely. A moment where a deeply personal boundary may have been crossed. A moment where emotion, conflict, and public attention collided in a way that no one could fully control. And a moment that revealed something bigger than the individuals involved. It revealed how quickly narratives can form. How easily private subjects can become public debate. And how hard it is to pull something back once it's been released into the world. In the end, no medical report was confirmed. No documents were verified. No definitive